So a couple of years ago, when we were designing our house, I wanted to incorporate a rainwater collection system in it. I did a bunch of YouTube checking and found a lot of good information. Also found some somewhat misleading stuff, or stuff that didn't help me. And so I thought I'd add this video to the mix and maybe it'll be helpful. I'd say my overall approach to rainwater collection is somewhat simplified. And the reason for that is I have no bypass system and I have no first flush system built into it. My reasons for this is that long-term it should be lower maintenance because of that. So we live in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia where we might get 40 inches of precipitation a year. So it's not arid, but we can go for weeks at a time without rain, especially in late summer. And here at our new location, the house we built, we're putting in lots of plants that need regular water, fruit trees, berries, garden, perennial and flower beds. That is what we're using all of the collected rainwater for. We aren't looking at drinking water, so that simplifies things a little bit. A lot of videos dealing with rainwater collection come from the outback in Australia, New Zealand, or other places where rainwater is the only water. So they're really serious about it. What I have would be a toy compared to those operations. For example, I'm collecting 2,000 gallons of water for watering plants. They're collecting 20,000 gallons to water plants and to live on. When we designed the house, we played with the idea of burying some cisterns, but we encountered lots of rock and we had a busy schedule and it just didn't happen. So when we were done, we found that we had a great possible location for an above ground upright tank under the deck. And we found a 2,100 gallon tank that was perfectly sized for our space, which we could slide between the supporting posts. And all the rainwater would flow down into it. So we're collecting off of roofs of our 20 by 45 foot shed and from the house. Quite a bit of roof space as it works out, and we're actually getting about 1,500 gallons in the tank from each inch of rain. So when we get 1.5 inches of rain, we're definitely filling the tank up and sending water out of the tank overflow. So installing the system involved a whole bunch of different major steps. The first step was the rain gutters. Now we had delayed installing the rain gutters for about a year after building the house. So by the time they were installed, we had fully designed the collection system, plus the shingles had already shed any loose stone, so that was good. All the gutters were installed from the beginning with leaf and debris screen guard and a single downspout for each section, even on the 45-foot runs. So the next major step was the water lines. We looked at various materials but ended up using 4-inch Schedule 20 PVC. This ended up being a lot of work. We started at the shed, which is up behind the house, and it involved digging through gravel pathways, pulling up deck boards, and so on. In the end, we ended up with 3 4-inch lines sloping gradually under the deck down to the tank and dumping into it. One of the lines was from the east side of the house, one from the west, and then one from the 2 shed roofs. Each brings about the same amount of water inflow. Well, the next major step, and obviously the core of the whole system, is the water tank. I bought a 2,100 gallon Norwesco polyethylene tank. It has a 16-inch manhole on the top for access, and that's where I put the water in, plus inlets and outlets. The tank size is right for me, and I'm impressed with the toughness of the polyethylene. The dark color keeps algae from growing. And then I paid a little bit extra for the screened manhole cover. It is part of my method of keeping junk out of the tank. Now, the next major project was the overflow system for the tank. Again, I used Schedule 20 pipe, except this time it's 3-inch. And it sucks the dirtiest water off the bottom of the tank during an overflow, not from the fresher water that's being dumped in at the top. In this picture, you can see the pipe running down the inside and then across the bottom. That's 3-inch pipe, and I took this picture before the water was in the tank at all. Now, in fact, when the overflow is fast enough, when the inflow is fast enough, a siphoning action set up, which absolutely sucks dirt off the bottom into the overflow. The tank starts to overflow when the water level hits this overflow pipe, and the water runs down the exterior of the tank in the pipe, runs into the ground, and then runs out and is dumped out onto open grass. Okay, the next major step I had not planned on. It was the water pump and the pressure tank. I'd started out planning just to water the beds down the hill below the tank by gravity feed, and that worked. But it gave less pressure than I expected and left everything in the upper beds, of course, high and dry. So I bought an inexpensive pump pressure tank from Harbor Freight and hooked it up. Not being a plumber, I had a lot of issues, but once I got the joints properly tightened and a check valve in place, the thing works like an absolute charm. So the final step is still ongoing, and that was disguising the tank behind lattice, the spray painting of all the visible PVC, and then the beginnings of landscaping in front of the tank. And that will continue over the next couple of years. In any case, we've got plenty of water to keep that landscaping watered. So at the beginning of the video, I talked about my decision to simplify the system. This involved two things: no redirection of the water in the winter and eliminating any first flush system. At first I planned to keep the water out of the whole system during the winter by redirecting water at each downspout. I didn't like that approach because it would have meant complication and clutter at each downspout. So the guy who did my gutters, who's very familiar with rainwater flow, freezing in the winter and so on, suggested that I simply run the water and melting snow directly through the system all year long. So at about the time of the first freeze, I'll drain the large tank, then remove the water depth gauge and the connection to the pump and replace it with a direct tank drain. And of course, I'll disconnect and remove the pump and the pressure tank. And then the next simplifying decision I made was to eliminate any first flush system. Now, the idea of a first flush system makes a lot of sense. The dusty roof is first washed down with rainwater that is not allowed into the tank, and afterward only clean water gets in. Now, if you're looking at rainwater systems, you'll see kits for first flush systems, but I had 3 lines coming into the tank with water that would all arrive at different times, due to distances from the roof. So I was looking at 3 first flush systems. That would have involved more clutter and complication. Also, some of the Australian water system installers talked about removing first flush systems rather than installing them because of complications. And you're still going to get dirty water in the tank in any case. So, I keep the tank as clean as possible with the screens on the gutters, the screen over the manhole, and then the overflow that comes off the bottom, especially when the siphoning action occurs. So the result of all this has been very satisfying. It feels good. I've got plenty of water pressure all over the property, and it is rainwater that is being pumped with electricity produced by solar power. During our 2 years or so here at the house, we've been on solar power and we've produced about 15% more than we're using. So when the sun shines, I'm producing electricity, and when it rains, I'm capturing rainwater. So, as it works out, this past September was very dry. We had one rain on September 1 and no more rains until September 30. Now, after the September 1 rain, I had 2,000 gallons in the tank. But by the 4th week of September, we had used all 2,000 gallons in watering stuff around the house here. So what that means is I had to use city water again, and that the tank is not too big. Now, I still have several things I want to do to complete this particular project. One is complete the landscaping. Another is adding an outlet closer to the pump so I don't have to run an extension cord, and maybe eventually run some underground permanent lines to hydrants throughout the property so that we don't have to drag lines so much, drag hoses so much. In any case, this whole project has been very satisfying, is working like a charm. I really like it, and I highly recommend that you put in your own system.